Hi everyone, this is Mark and welcome back to our YouTube channel. A while ago, we bought an abandoned piece of land and started turning it into our home. Right in the middle of the forest, far from all the city noise. This is our story, and if you are curious how we got here, check out the previous episodes and don't forget to subscribe for more. Alright, let's get back to work. We already had some U-blocks in stock, which I bought previously, but we needed some more. Why? These U-blocks will act as a permanent formwork for the ring beam, right before the roof goes on. I'll explain everything once we reach that stage, but we decided to order them early, since not every supplier keeps them available all the time. Luckily, our supplier managed to get them for us. We bought around 50 pieces for a total of 1400 zloty. They're a bit more expensive, but when it's just two of us working, they save a ton of time and effort. I definitely recommend them, it's absolutely worth it. Each time something comes on a pallet, we had to pay a 50 zloty deposit. Once you return the pallets, you get your money back. It actually worked out great for us. Every time our supplier delivered new materials, he picked up the old pallets, so we ended up paying less overall. It also helped keep the construction site a lot more organized, since we didn't have to stack off empty pallets lying around. Plus, we didn't have to worry about storing or transporting them ourselves, which saved us both time and space. Not like we don't have space, but you know. Before we jumped to the next step and started using those U-blocks, we had to finish the walls. This has definitely been the most challenging part of the entire build so far. One pallet has 48 blocks and we ordered 12 pallets. That's 576 blocks in total, all of which had to be moved manually by me. My wife helped me whenever she could, but lifting and carrying them was mostly my job. Each block weighs around 21 kilograms, so that's roughly 12 tons. I had to move and stack by hand. The first few rows were pretty easy, since I didn't have to lift them very high, but as the walls grew taller, everything became much more difficult. I often had to stop, take breaks, and rebuild my strength before continuing. Some days felt endless, especially when the weather wasn't on my side. But step by step, the wall started to take shape, and seeing the progress every day kept me motivated. Everything can be done alone. It just takes a lot more time. Still, knowing that we build this with our own hands makes me incredibly proud of us, and every bit of effort feels completely worth it. I had finished 8 out of 10 rows of the walls by myself, then I got some great news from my dad. He told me he would have some free time soon and could come over to help me finish the last 2 rows. That meant we could finally move on to the ring beam and then continue with the roof. Honestly, this was a huge relief. At that point I could really use an extra pair of hands. But I also knew he had been dealing with some back pain, so it wasn't ideal for him to be on the construction site, let alone doing some heavy lifting. What I really wanted from him was his knowledge and instructions. But of course, he insisted on helping with the physical work anyway. There is one thing I really dislike: stepping on debris and twisting my ankle. So every now and then, I would stop and give inside the house a good little cleaning session. For me, sweeping the floor is oddly relaxing. I love getting rid of all the dust and making everything look tidy. Even though there is still no roof, it felt great to see the space clean. After a good clean, the house was ready to welcome the guests and for us to continue to work together as a team. A few days later, my dad showed up with his girlfriend, and that's when the real teamwork started. First, we finished the last 2 rows of bricks, and once the 10th row was done, we moved straight on to the next steps. Having extra hands was amazing, because normally I had to do everything by myself. Cut the bricks, climb off the stands, climb back up, and then lay them. This time, I basically just stayed on the stand while all the materials were brought to me. All I had to do was focus on laying the bricks. It was so much faster. One great thing about building in the summer is weather. We slept in tents and cooked outside. Of course, we mostly worked, but we still found time to relax a bit, have a couple of beers, chill and talk. And by staying on the site instead of driving back and forth between home and the farm, well, we just saved a lots of time. The next step was the ring beam, which is a concrete structural layer that goes on the top of the walls. This is where the U-blocks come into the picture, because those blocks will be filled with rebars and concrete. But before installing the U-blocks, we needed to cut planks and use them to prop up the walls where the windows and the doors are, since those areas have gaps. The planks temporarily hold the blocks in place until the concrete cures, and later on we can just remove those. We still had plenty of planks left from the previous orders, so all what we had to do was measure the gaps for the windows and the doors and cut the planks to the right size. My dad handled that part while I was preparing the blocks. The planks weren't wide enough on their own, so we placed a couple side by side and just nailed them together. It wasn't complicated work, but it had to be done carefully so everything would stay level and stable. Once all the supports were ready, we could finally move on, placing the U-blocks without worrying about anything shifting. My dad worked on the support for the U-blocks, while I focused on cutting the corner pieces. Each corner block had to be cut in 45 degrees angle, so the two ends could meet perfectly without wasting any material. You also have to be really careful when cutting these blocks, because they can crack super easily. But I was basically a pro that day, not a single crack. I started with the 4 corners again, and honestly, it was a bit annoying to have to move the stand every time, just to one place and to another, put up 2 blocks, then move it again and again. But hey, someone had to do it. Once the corners were set, we stretched a good old string line between them and started filling the gaps with the rest of the blocks. We called it a day before finishing because we were absolutely exhausted. Look at my dad, celebrating me working like a pro. So we came back the next morning and picked up right where we left off. I was catching up pretty fast with the blocks, so I told my dad to speed up with the supports, but of course, he still finished before I could reach him. Later that morning, we finally completed the whole formwork, ready to be filled with rebars and concrete. That was a really exciting moment, because the windows and the doors finally had their shape. It actually felt like you were walking into a real home. Thinking back to just a few months earlier, when there were literally nothing on the land, it felt amazing to see how far we've come. We gave the door a couple of extra supports on the side just to be safe. Concrete is heavy, and I've seen way too many videos of formworks blowing out. No way that was happening here. That's it for today's update. In 2 weeks we will continue with the ring beam. But until then, try to guess how I managed to lift this 6 meter long rebar cage all alone from the ground up onto the top of the walls. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, give it a like and share it with your friends. If you have any questions, leave it down below the comments. See you in 2 weeks. Mark is out. Peace.